everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Claire and today I want to talk about Sarah J Maas and her books Court of Frost and Starlight and the new adult fantasy Crescent City, House of Tears and Blood, Earth and Blood, I don't even know. This is going to be spoiler filled, no holding back. I have quite a bit of affection for Sarah J Maas and her work, but I definitely recognize her occasional ridiculousness as well. So that all being said, let's get started. So first I want to start off with Court of Frost and Starlight. So this is a novella that takes place after the events in the Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy. It is very strange and not very good. It's almost purely worth reading if you can get a hold of a copy that has the next 3 chapters in the new trilogy that's taking place in the same universe but with different characters. That little bit at the end was, well, let's get into it. So first of all, very clearly a cash grab, but one that's trying to put to bed Farah and Rasan's conflict storyline, because all you get with them is basically how perfect their relationship is, how in love they are with each other, how good fae they are towards their family and their citizens, and how wealthy they are and how everything is perfect, and now they're gonna start a family, and it is so boring, so dreadfully dull. But Farah and Rasan's chapters are in first person, and then when you get to Cassian and the one chapter with Nesta, theirs is in third limited. So I think it's also trying to transition you, even just on a writing level, like, okay, this next trilogy, although it takes place in the same world, it is going to be different. And that's just confirmed in the additional 3 chapters at the end of this book. Okay, so the best part of this book, outside of the 3 chapters that have nothing to do with this book, when everyone gets together for the winter solstice and they're having their big dinner, and I just like seeing all these characters that I have grown very attached to and whose personalities I know, and just seeing them all interact and just laugh or even have conflicts with each other. It's like, aw, I like them. And I kind of enjoy that there's no longer this like end of the world doomsday plot hanging over them. I'm very curious to see what the new major conflict is going to be in the next trilogy, because that's very, very Sarah J Maas. She is not one to have a small like character study conflict. Like, everything always just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Nesta is the most interesting and the driving force of this book, and she seems to be the main conflict in the next book, and it rules. She's so interesting. She was my favorite character in the original trilogy. She seemed to be the only one with any sense and who seemed to be the most rational out of all the characters, and I just love that she was an unrelenting bitch. She loved her family and she would die for her family, and then everyone else she was just so cutthroat about. She is just mean. Now, after they went to war, and granted she saw her dad die, so that's traumatic, but like everyone else is alive and fine and well, but she is just struggling. But I love that her struggle has just turned her into this like really mean alcoholic floozy that like refuses to spend any time with her family but still takes their money and lives in squalor and won't shower for a few days and is taking home different men every night. That's the one thing where I was like, ew, Nesta, don't do that. I just love that she's clearly going through something, but she is just refuses to give an inch, and the only reason she went to the solstice party was to get rent money from Farah. Like, that was hilarious. But yeah, everything involving Farah, like, I was just rolling my eyes constantly. What presents am I gonna get for my family? All I want to do is start a basically non-profit for my community. It's just the dullest thing, and it was one of those where like Farah and Rhysand can do no wrong. Oh, the one other interesting part in this novella was when Rhysand went to visit Tamlin, because Tamlin is also, he's an actual interesting character because he's so gray. Everyone involved with the Night Court, even though they're supposed to be like kind of gray characters, they're angels basically. Even the ones I like I love me Cassian and some Azriel, but they are saints. They can basically do no wrong. But Tamlin is so like depressed and weird right now, and I actually thought that Rhysand kept overreacting because he would go visit him and he's just like, it's taking all my willpower not to kill him right here and now. And it's like, okay, first of all, Tamlin has saved your mate's life multiple times, and he saved your life, and he helped with the turning point in the war. I understand he and Farah had issues in their relationship and they were not a good match, but acting like he's just this evil fae male just seems so ridiculous, and kind of made Rhysand, who's supposed to be this like very cool, level-headed leader, greatly overreacting. So I hope that we get to see more of Tamlin and what's going on with him in the next trilogy, because he ended up being one of the most interesting characters, even though in the first book he was kind of dull and mediocre, and then by the second book everyone hated him, as you're supposed to. But then by the third book, he was just so weird and off-putting, but also kept saving people's lives. Hence why I think he's way more interesting than really anyone in the Night Court right now other than Cassian. I really like Cassian because his relationship with Nesta is super weird. By the end of A Court of Wing and Ruin, they're in this grand battle and Cassian is about to die, and he and Nesta basically confess their love for each other without explicitly saying I love you. And yet in this book it's like they cannot stand to be around each other. Same with the 3 chapters that are included in the end for the next trilogy. It's like they hate each other, they can't stand to be around each other, they're so frustrated. What happened? What went wrong other than like Nesta shut down and collapsed in on herself? I just hope whatever happens with Nesta in this next trilogy, because reading these next 3 chapters, one, there is a huge up in quality in writing. You can tell with this one too, like part of the reason it feels like a cash grab is because the writing is not good. It feels like a first draft, especially when I was listening to Crescent City and then got to these next 3 chapters, and it's like, whoa, the quality difference was wild. So I hope that with this next trilogy there is a lot of thought and care put into Nesta and her emotional state, her emotional being, and that while I thoroughly tend to enjoy most Sarah J Maas stories and her books, and part of it is that she's just hyper creative, these conflicts are wild, her battles, like the way things resolve are just constantly escalating in a way that's ridiculous but really, really fun. Sometimes when it comes to the emotional stuff and the internal stuff, it's a little obvious and it gets resolved, in my opinion, way too easily. So I hope that Nesta and Cassian, whatever's going on with them, is a little bit more drawn out in an interesting and complicated way. Like I said, these first few chapters included at the end of this book gave me a lot of hope. It actually kept me up at night because I kept thinking, like, where are we gonna go? What's gonna happen next? Because, okay, I'm gonna assume that if you're watching this video, then you know what I'm talking about with these chapters included. I love that Farah and Rhysand were just like, yeah, you gotta go. Nesta, you have abused this system. You have abused our charity for over a year. Like, you get to go to boot camp with Cassian. That is just such a great beginning of a plot. I can't begin to predict how that's going to escalate. So it's like, okay, is the world going to end again? That makes me nervous, but by the end of those sample chapters, I was completely sold. I am thoroughly invested in reading this next trilogy. Can't say this was good by any stretch of the imagination, except that it did get me pumped for the next trilogy, which I suspect is the whole reason it was written in the first place. I hope that in the next trilogy too, we get minimal Farah and Rhysand and Night Court stuff, just because I'm kind of over them. They're so perfect, they're so in love, they're such good fae and leaders, and just everything they touch turns to gold. And you can only read that for so long before, even in something as short as this, it was just exhausting. Alright, so now let's talk about Sarah J Maas's first adult fantasy, Crescent City, A House of Earth and Blood. I wasn't sure what to expect because her other books, her YA books, all of them are already pretty adult. So I was like, what about this could possibly be more adult other than the main character being in her early 20s instead of her late teens? And there's just more cursing and a lot of it. You know, at first I found it pretty distracting because it really felt like it was thrown into every single bit of dialogue. If a 13-year-old was sitting down and being like, ooh, what can I do to make this story more adult? But eventually I adjusted to it. I listened to this book over Audible, by the way, as I have with 99.9% of Sarah J Maas series. And as for this one, I did find it to be incredibly ambitious, even for her. I liked that this fantasy world was very modernized. They have cell phones and cars, and they live in this very mythological and creature diverse city. There's just a lot of interesting elements to it that I wasn't expecting but really enjoyed. I liked Bryce, I liked Danica, I liked that they're kind of party girls and go out to nightclubs. I liked the mystery aspect. I was surprised, especially for Sarah J Maas, because she has a tendency to make everything extremely obvious, like mystery, both for shipping characters and just general plot mysteries. You can usually figure it out within sentences, like, okay, who's the real bad guy, or who is this character going to end up with romantically. And with this, when it came to the plot mystery, I truly had no idea. I did not know what to expect. I enjoyed the red herrings. I thought the clues Bryce, the main character, was picking up was very interesting. And I liked that her and Hunt, which, I mean, granted, that was also very obviously the romantic intention, but I like that even by the end of the book, they still didn't have sex yet. I was like, whoa, how very not Sarah J Maas-ian. I liked that this romantic tension, there was a very natural progression to it. I could see where first they kind of don't like each other, and then there's that sexual tension, and then the romantic tension. Like, I thought this was actually one of the better portrayed romances that she's had. I thought some of the political aspects of the world of Crescent City and just the continent was a little complicated. It's one of those books where I was like, I wish I owned a physical copy just to look at some maps, like a character spreadsheet or something, because there's so many characters, there's so many political leaders and different factions. By the end of the story, when I had like 3 hours left, that's when it turned into the very over-the-top climactic Maasian story that I know and love. I actually really liked her taking, what is it called? The plunge. The thing that Bryce had to do at the end to access her Starlight power. That whole thing, I was kind of confused on like, how is she doing that? Why does she have to do that? Why do people have to wait till they're like 18 or older to do that? It is not made super clear, at least it wasn't to me, but I still found it to be a pretty interesting climax, and like Hunt saving her. It's still a very over the top fantasy ending that's not too different from her other over-the-top endings in her other books and series, except because they can use modern aspects like guns or helicopters or bombs, it adds this twist to it. And then one of my biggest issues with this book is this weird side plot, sub-personal issue that Bryce was having. The night that Danica got murdered, goes to a club, takes all these drugs, drinks a ton, and sleeps with a random dude in a club bathroom, which is nasty. And she brags about it to Danica after accepting one of the wolf guy's date invitation. So it was like, you're gonna go on a date with this guy who is clearly in love with you tomorrow, but you are sleeping with a stranger in a nightclub bathroom tonight. Like, it's like, okay, Bryce, you're a wreck. And then this guy dies. So then you jump 2 years later, and she's abstaining from drinking. Like, she doesn't drink anymore, she doesn't party, she won't even dance, but she's still sleeping with strangers in the same nightclub restroom, which I cannot express how just gross that is. One, I find that weird, like it's not consistent with all these other things that she's abstaining from. Like, her best friend and all these people she knew got brutally murdered, and now she won't even dance because she feels too guilty, and yet she's still going to sleep with strangers and in like a very nasty public setting, which is like the exact same thing that she did before this event happened. So you would think that this would be a perfect opportunity to be like, I have been abstinent from men for 2 years, and that could like play into her relation with Hunt and having feelings for him. And then it comes into the plot where it's like, oh, these it's so silly, but the text messages that Bryce sent to Danica expressing that she was high on drugs and sleeping with strangers in the bathroom get printed out and leaked to the papers, and all these people are harassing her, and it's like, ooh, that's like, yeah, you don't look good, that really sucks. But there's never a moment with Bryce with her like just internally being like, yeah, I really shouldn't have done that. Instead of her internalizing that and being like, why did I act that way? Like, was it because I was scared? Like, I said yes to him, but I ultimately didn't want to open up? Or like, it could have been a moment of self-reflection, but instead it was like, all these people bullied me and I almost killed myself. I don't know, it was such a strange character moment for Bryce, and I think everything else was handled more or less pretty well. I enjoy Sarah J Maas and I enjoy her stories, and so I enjoyed this. Like, it's one of those things I just take it with a grain of salt and I just have fun while I'm listening. I will give a shout out to Ruin, her stepbrother, who I liked, and then what is her name, La Habra? The little flame sprite, who I hope something happens and she actually comes back, because her like sacrificing herself and dying, drowning at the end, I was like, oh, that's so sad. I really liked her. She was such a breath of fresh air to what's this like very kind of dark and sad story. Hunt's storyline is very tragic and very sad. Hunt's mother gets murdered, and then Hunt's true love gets murdered. He's in charge of this rebellion that fails, and now he's a slave. It's like everybody's backstories was trying to top everyone else's terrible backstories. Now, I have heard some various opinions about Crescent City. I know a few people that just don't like it at all. And I've heard, I would say, mostly extremely positive things about the book. There's a general consensus that this is some of her best work. I definitely want to know what you guys think of Crescent City, and then of course what you think about the new Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy that will be coming out. I'm committed to finishing out this new trilogy, but I think I am actually way more excited for the new Nesta and Cassian focused trilogy. And I already know them, but I think there's just something about that storyline appears to be kind of stripped down and more personal, and there's just something really interesting going on there. I am looking forward to both installments, so let me know down below what you're most excited for if you're a Sarah J Maas fan, if you're not, and why, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!